For hundreds of years, Christians have been taking pilgrimages to the Holy Land to walk the places that Jesus walked and be in the environment where Jesus did a lot of his ministry. And just 24 hours ago, I got back from a 10-day trip in the Holy Land and visiting some of the most inspiring and influential places that Jesus and the disciples did their ministry from. And the nation of Israel has been no stranger to controversy, having gone through numerous wars, conflict, and persecution, leading to a complicated history that is both equally inspiring and polarizing. So in this video, I'll be giving you the 10 surprising and shocking takeaways that I got during my 10-day trip to the Holy Land.
Ruslan.
This video is going to be a little different. It's going to be exhaustive. It's going to be a list of the top surprising lessons, things I didn't know from my Israel trip. So we got 10 takeaways, 10 takeaways, 10 takeaways. Okay. So the first of the 10 takeaways I want to make sure you guys know about is the archaeology in Israel. The archaeology in Israel consistently keeps expanding the knowledge base. Okay, we went to so many different archaeological sites that were recently discovered. Okay, I'm talking places connected to David's temple. I'm talking places connected to different things that they keep digging up within relatively modern terms, within 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 10 years, 20 years, King Herod's palace. And the more the archaeology comes up, the more it proves the very stories in the Bible that people said, oh, we don't know if David was a real person. We don't know if these things really happened, right? And so the more things they discover from the archaeology, the more it proves the biblical narrative to be true, which is kind of mind-boggling if you think about archaeology being used to testify to the very things that oftentimes skeptics who've gone more and more postmodern have stayed away from. And so I'm kind of showing you guys some different places that we went to that have different archaeological sites that were recently discovered, okay, which will blow your mind if you actually go and check out some of these places that are like incredible. Okay, so that's the first thing, is the archaeology was beautiful, okay? Okay, so the second thing is that I'm going backwards on my list, is that Christians in Israel, evangelical Christians, okay, folks who would identify as being spirit-filled, charismatic, whatever, pretty much all of them, they don't, that are Israelis, they don't view themselves as being converted to Christianity. What does that mean? That means that when I was engaging with the natives, and that was probably my favorite part, when I was engaging with the natives, and I would say, hey, so when did you convert? When did you get saved? They don't view themselves as converted. They don't view themselves as, hey, I got saved, okay? They view themselves as, I am Jewish, I am Israeli, and now I believe in Yeshua the Messiah, okay? So it's not separate. It's not in a way that we think it is, where all of a sudden you are one religion and then you become another religion. It's actually not like that at all. They view it as a continuation. Exactly, Kelly. They view it as a continuation of the faith that they held before. So I found that extremely interesting, is that it's not what you think it is. It's not a separate religion to them, okay? Okay. Another thing is, I got to do Shabbat with I think they would be called modern Orthodox family. I got to do Shabbat. I didn't get any footage of that, unfortunately, so I won't be showing you any of that because we're supposed to have our phones off. Now, the discipline of consistently turning off your phone, the discipline of consistently unplugging from the outside world at Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, everything pretty much shut down in the Jewish quarters. Everything is shut down. And so the beauty of that sort of discipline of like, hey, we are going to be completely locked into family time was amazing. And we, they gave me this cool like Shabbat book that they did. They celebrated, they prayed over their kids, they read scripture, and they enjoyed a meal together. And this family opened up their homes, and there was about 20 plus of us in there who were in there enjoying ourselves and eating dinner, the Shabbat dinner. But during this conversation, the host said something that was really interesting to me. And the host is actually one of the biggest podcasters in Israel, believe it or not. He said, so these will be an Orthodox modern Jews. Okay, so they don't have the curly thing, but they do keep Shabbat. They do eat kosher. Okay, so they're serious about their faith. And the host said something to me. He said, in our paradigm, we do then feel. They do then feel. They don't feel and then do. Okay, in our Western paradigm, we often need to feel the presence of God. We need to feel the Holy Spirit. We need to feel an emotional connection. We need to feel the supernatural. And they say, no. We do it the opposite. We do first, and we practice our faith, and then we feel the benefits of what comes with practicing your faith and being disciplined. And oftentimes, I think on the American side, we're very into the theology side, which I think is awesome, the study of God. But I think theology is reflected more in our praxology, the way we practice our faith, and less in a true or false litmus test of do you believe these things or don't believe these things. Though that's important. How many Americans would say they believe Jesus is the Son of God? I would say probably a majority. But do the majority of Americans live as if they believe Jesus is the Son of God, right? So instead of feeling and then doing, instead of looking for the emotional side or the believing side, they do and then they feel. And it's an interesting paradigm that I think more of us can learn from. Okay. In the Shabbat side, listen, man, this is going to be controversial, okay? They know how to celebrate, okay? Outside of Shabbat, which we had wine at Shabbat, and Shabbat Sabbath dinner, you're not really supposed to, decline certain things. So I had a glass of wine, first time I drank in a very long time. And then we also saw bar mitzvah. I believe we were near the Temple Mount, outside of the walls, around, it was a Monday, and so that's when they do their bar mitzvah celebrations. I think it's the first Monday of the month. And they did a bar mitzvah situation. And let me tell you this, the Jews there know how to celebrate. They know how to party. They know how to turn up. And that to me was interesting because I think in our American paradigm, and this is the part that's going to be controversial. In our American paradigm, we're very influenced by Puritan culture and by prohibition that I think we got it completely wrong on celebration, okay? There was dancing, there was music, there was alcohol. It was the full gamut, okay? And I think we've done ourselves a disservice in taking on a prohibition Puritan view of celebration to the point where, yes, it's legalistic. And this is what I mean. In America, we have a binary. You do or you don't. Every holiday is good or evil, right? And in their paradigm, they celebrate, man. And so I think, and this is going to be controversial, okay? Their prohibition, our prohibition view, our Puritan view, may be the thing that could be adding to substance abuse in our society, meaning that they teach their kids very early on how to and when to properly celebrate, properly consume alcohol and food, and there seems to be less substance abuse amongst that culture because there's a time and a place for everything, as we know in Ecclesiastes, right? To drink and be merry, so on and so forth. And so I'm not saying my conviction of like, oh, I'm going to start drinking alcohol is changing. It's not. But I did have a glass of wine, and I did find it very interesting that they love to celebrate, and we Christians, most Christians in America, have a struggle with that. Even the Christians who try to exhibit moderation, they end up blowing it and crossing the line. And every Jewish person that I was around, every Jewish person I celebrated, never crossed the line. I've never seen somebody sloshed. I've never seen somebody drunk. I've never seen any of these things. And so I think we might be really, really doing ourselves a disservice by not enjoying things more. Holidays, celebration, that sort of thing. And so that was really interesting. And I think this ties into the next point is when you have a healthy context of celebration, a healthy context of when to celebrate, of when to consume things in moderation, so on and so forth. I didn't see very many homeless people. I think the entire time I was in Israel for about 8 nights, I think. I saw maybe 2 homeless people. Okay. And I was all over. I was all over Jerusalem. I was all over Tel Aviv. I was, Sea of Galilee, everywhere. I didn't see a ton of homeless people. Now, I just don't know if they just keep their streets clean or you're not allowed to sleep on the street. But it was not like the way it was in New York. I went to New York before I went there. Flew out of New York. It was not the way it is even in Oceanside or in downtown San Diego. There's not a lot of homeless people, and I don't know what that is. But I think it's connected, okay? That's my opinion. I think there's something with having a healthy context of how to celebrate and how to live life and how to give God glory in all things. And so, anyway, I think there's some legalism we're dealing with, and I think we need to get better at that. Okay, so those are the first five things. Those are the first 5 things that stood out to me. Brief, hold on, let me go back. Brief recap. The archaeology keeps improving. Christians there don't see themselves as converted. They see themselves as, the Israeli Christians. They don't see themselves as converted. They see themselves as continuing on in the same faith. They just now believe Yeshua is the Messiah. The discipline and consistency of Shabbat was beautiful. They do then feel. They don't feel to do. They have a balance and a healthy perspective on celebration. And I did not see a ton of homeless people. So those are the first 5. Before I get into the second 5, I need you guys to smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Almost 50% of the people that watch this channel are not subscribed. We're about to crack, I think, 240,000 here on this channel. So make sure you subscribe. We also got a second channel where you guys can check out our Blessed God Studios channel. Okay, so those are the first 5. Now, the second 5 are going to be a bit more controversial. Okay. 50% of the Hasidic Jewish men, the ultra-Orthodox men, this is shocking, don't work, okay? And they don't serve in the military. I'm going to come back to the military point here in a second, but they don't work. They're held down financially by their wives. And I found this very interesting because this ties into their political system. Now, in our context, our political system, when we think of conservatives, we think of fiscally conservatives. They're the party that just won. They're not fiscally conservative. They're just conservative. And conservative just means they're more religious and aligned with the religious values of trying to keep Israel a primarily Jewish nation. So there's this 12 to 15% of Ultra-Orthodox. The gentlemen you see with the curls, some of them wear hats. They're not just modern Orthodox like a Ben Shapiro or Dennis Prager. Guys that you'll see with the yarmulkes, no, they're ultra-Orthodox. They don't work. And what does that mean? That means that the Conservative Party has them as their constituents and that the Conservative Party actually is more fiscally liberal in creating welfare assistance and programs for the ultra-Orthodox, that don't work. And why don't they work? Because, they see themselves as serving their country by primarily studying Torah. They primarily study Torah. They primarily read. They primarily immerse themselves in the religion. And I found that very, very interesting. So the politics there are totally different. And the folks there don't work. And more of them are starting to work. More of them are starting to have like startups and different things like that. But the women end up holding down the financial side of things with regards to working. And the men, 50% of them stay home and study Torah, which I found extremely fascinating. And having said that, they also the men and the women also have mandatory military service. If you are an Israeli citizen, you have to serve in the military. Men serve almost 3 years, women serve 2 years. Mandatory, everybody, okay? Except the ultra-Orthodox Jews. And so there's the ultra-Orthodox, there's different sects within that. There's the modern Orthodox, think of Ben Shapiro. Then there is secular Jews that don't have any real belief. They work in these kind of like communities. But 3 years of service is required unless you're the ultra-Orthodox, and they kind of have like a way out because of their faith, and they believe they serve the country by studying Torah and praying and doing those sorts of things all day. Very fascinating. But I think the service in the military, and this is where, maybe America can have some perspective on this, the service in the military creates very strong and capable men and women. It creates very strong and capable men that are physically active, that are then allowed to conceal and carry in Israel because you can't, like, everybody can conceal and carry, but if you've done some time in the military, you can't conceal and carry. So you got folks that are carrying, you got folks that are very capable, a lot of them know martial arts, a lot of them know self-defense, and a lot of them end up being reservists and can be called back in at any time, which I found extremely fascinating. Another thing is that most Israeli citizens know multiple languages. This was very inspiring, okay? So the average Israeli is taught Hebrew, Arabic, and English. And many of them also know French. If you're an Armenian, which Armenians have a quarter, I'm Armenian. If you're Armenian, you also learn Armenian. And many of them also learn Yiddish, which is a lot of what the Ultra-Orthodox language they speak is Yiddish. So you're talking about my friend Tony, who I had on the channel. You guys can go and watch my interview. I'll try to kind of link that up at the end here. Tony knows French, English, Hebrew, Armenian, and Arabic. Five languages. Five languages he knows, right? That's pretty fascinating. That inspired me to go, man, I want to learn Armenian, right? That's pretty cool, so they know languages. Now, why are they so well educated? Why do they have to serve in the military? What's going on there? Well, one of the things you'll discover is that Iran doesn't believe Israel should exist. I'm going to touch on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which is very complicated, so I'm not going to go super deep into it, but I'll touch on that in a moment. But Iran doesn't believe Israel should exist and has the right to exist as a nation. So we went on the Libyan border and the Syrian border, which Iran can kind of go through Syria or Libya, which means that those folks who serve in the military, who have to learn all these different languages, grow up with a totally different paradigm of the world. They grow up believing, and rightfully so, that a lot of their neighbors aren't their neighbors. A lot of their neighbors want them wiped off the face of the earth. That's a different perspective than most of us grow up with. That's a different view than most of us can ever understand of having people that want you annihilated. They don't want you to exist. They don't want you to have any placement in the world, right? And so you have this Judeo-Christian country surrounded by a bunch of folks that aren't really their allies, right? And so I think that creates a different sense of purpose, a different urgency, a different desire. I'll give you an example. Think about how many people you personally know that serve in the military. Now, depending on what part of the country you are, you may know a few. Now, think about how many people you personally know that have lost their lives to service in the military. Right? I know a few because I'm here in San Diego, North County, San Diego. We have 3 military bases. But if you're not near a military base, you may not know anyone. And they asked us this question, and very few people raised their hand. Now, they said, we all know dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of people that have served in the military, and we also know dozens of people that have lost their lives in the conflict, lost their lives over these different wars and over these different spur-ups. And so, that creates a different type of person. That creates a different type of mentality. That creates a different type of paradigm, right? So it's real, man. It's real in the sense of, like, what conflict is like, and that it can go down any time, and that the world is a dark place, friends. Okay, that the world's not sweet, that it's not it's not all peaches. And we are very, very sheltered here. We are very sheltered in America. We have it very good. Now, this kind of brings me to my last point, and I'm not going to go super deep on this, but the Israeli and Palestinian conflict is defined, very interesting, by Israelis and Palestinians, and we got to fully immerse ourselves. We went all the way up to we went into the West Bank, okay, which is controlled by the Palestinian Authority. I'm trying to pull up some footage for you guys. That is controlled by the Palestinian Authority. We went near the Gaza Strip, and we got a full-on immersion. I'll show you guys some of our time in the West Bank. Give me a second here. This is driving into the West Bank, and what you'll notice is that there's a sign that says, citizens of Israel are forbidden to go into the West Bank, and this is per the Israeli law, right? And so the West Bank is controlled. It's controlled by the Palestinian Authority. And we went to Bethlehem, the city where Jesus was born, which was historically a very Christian town. And when these stir-up happens and these conflicts happens, they ended up building a border around the West Bank. And so I'm showing you guys footage from the West Bank. The West Bank is very beautiful. Again, city where Jesus was born, which is why a lot of folks still call Jesus a Palestinian Jew. This is a evangelical Baptist church that we went to and heard from a Palestinian Christian pastor. Okay, believe it or not. And again, remember, the vast majority of Palestine was a Christian nation or a Christian community, especially in Bethlehem. And so I found that very interesting. Okay, so here is some different types of graffiti and different types of artwork. And Banksy, the famous artist Banksy, actually did a lot of pieces within the West Bank and ended up buying a hotel in the West Bank. Okay, and so it's a very complicated conflict. And this is how they describe the conflict. They describe the conflict as two different narratives. Okay, two different narratives, meaning that it's not two different truths. They acknowledge that the Palestinian has their side, and there's a lot of facts around that, and the Israelis have their side. So this is a hotel that Banksy actually bought, and then he ended up giving it over to the Palestinian people. And so it's a very interesting conflict that, again, I'm not going to go super deep in because it's multi-layered and it's multi-generational, and the concept of two different narratives, I found it very helpful, and this is why. We think of postmodernism in different truths, and that's wonky, okay? But they have their own narratives about their own points of history. And depending on where you fall on this whole spectrum of Israel and Palestine is really going to be the point at which your timeline picks up. If you go 2,000 years back, that was historically Judea. Jews are people that come from the land of Judea. By the way, Jewish people are of all persuasions. Jewish people are not white. They haven't been identified as white up until recently. And anyone that goes to Israel will tell you that there's substantially more Israelis, when I'm talking Israelis who are Jews with yarmulkes on, that are darker skinned, Arab-looking, Middle Eastern-looking, and they don't look like me. I was one of the lightest people there, okay? So Jews are not white. They're multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural, and they have their starting point of when they believe the timeline starts, which is 2,000 years back, the David establishing and reconciling the kingdoms, all that sort of stuff. Palestinians and a lot of Jews who actually identify as Palestinians and a lot of Christians identify closer to Palestinians because Rome ended up renaming that part of the land Palestinians. And a lot of the folks took on the identity of, I'm a Palestinian, because they didn't know that it was renamed after as a mockery of the Philistines, right? That's where the root name comes from, Philistines. So it's like mocking the region, the land of Judea, calling it Philistine. But this wasn't found out until hundreds of years later, the history of it. So people kind of took on the identity of just, we're Palestinians, we're from this land. And I'll show you guys some more footage. That's the Dome of the Rock, and Jerusalem is kind of controlled by four different quarters, right? You have the Armenian quarter, you have the Armenian Orthodox quarter, the Christian quarter, the Jewish quarter, and the Muslim quarter. Okay, so multi-ethnic, multi-racial. Jordan is right on the border. Very, very interesting layout of the country. And speaking to folks there, a lot of Christians, a lot of the Armenian Christians identify more with the Arabs and more with the Palestinians. Here's a mind-blowing fact for you guys. The oldest tattoo shop, and let me see if I can find it on here. The oldest tattoo shop in the world is actually in Jerusalem. Okay, so if you want to see, if you want to have your mind blown in terms of, the conversation of tattoos that everybody freaks out about, I'll show you guys the oldest tattoo shop going back 29 generations, okay, 800 years in Jerusalem, in the Christian quarter ran by a Palestinian family. Okay, that's confusing for you. Right? So here's them going back. Here's their guns. Very, very interesting. And Christians have been going to Jerusalem for hundreds of years getting pilgrimage tattoos. Who would have thought? And so here is a shot of me getting a pilgrimage tattoo by a Palestinian Christian, getting the Jerusalem cross on me. I got 2 tattoos. It was a vibe. And the tattoos there are actually stamps that his great-great-great-great-grandfather. So the 2 stamps that I got made are hundreds of years old, 500 years old, right? And so you see, that's a handwritten, translated Aramaic version of the Bible. There's one of their stamps right here. It's called Razuk Tattoo. Okay, who would have thought, right? And again, they sell this like 4 Gospels in the original Aramaic language. Crazy stuff. So there's a lot to learn. There's a lot we don't know. Okay, and I recommend everybody go there at least once. It's one of the most diverse parts of the parts I've ever been. It's this multicultural, pluralistic part of the world that the moment I got off the airplane, I literally heard Russian, Hebrew, Yiddish, English, French, just walking through the airport. There's so many languages there. On the way back, I sat next to a lady, and I could tell by her accent she spoke Russian. I started speaking to her in Russian, and she been in Israel for 50 years, speaks Yiddish, speaks English, speaks Hebrew, speaks Russian, right? Most people know multiple languages. A lot of our views on stuff, I don't know how else to tell you guys, but coming back from this, a lot of our views on stuff, man, we're legalistic, fam. Everything from alcohol to tattoos to celebration, I think we blow it. And it's interesting to go back to the origins of our faith, whether Christian or Jewish, and to see them displayed completely different than you would have anticipated, completely different than you would have ever thought. Here's me walking through. This is my buddy Emmanuel. I did an interview with him that day, walking across the Christian Quarter into a Palestinian Christian restaurant that we had dinner at. And guys, very, very interesting. Very interesting. We went to, this is us in the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus bled. This is us at the Garden Tomb where the crucifixion, one of 2 locations where the crucifixion happened. They don't know exactly where it happened. And I was able to go to the tomb and the empty tomb of Jesus, which was crazy. Let me see if I can show you guys. I think this is me walking into the tomb. Oh, this is right after I came into the tomb. And so anyway, guys, very interesting place. I feel like everybody should go at least once because it is a trip, man. It is a trip, and it'll open your mind up to things that you just never thought about. You know, Christians and tattoos. Yuck! How can Christians get tattoos? And then you go there and you find out, well, Christians actually been getting tattoos for hundreds of years. Who would have thought? Right? Alcohol, archaeology, science, all of these different things, multiculturalism, a pluralistic society, understanding that people who feel oppressed are going to have a different narrative than you about their experience and are going to have a different timeline. You don't have to mark everybody as other, even though they may have a different perspective. And so there's a lot of folks doing reconciliation talk between the Palestinians and the Christians. It's beautiful. How did it feel to walk? How did it feel to walk where Jesus once walked? It felt amazing. It felt amazing. It felt really cool. It felt. We went to an archaeological site. I don't think it was open to the public yet. 30 feet underground, where we know for a fact that Jesus walked there. That was a trip. Okay, that was a trip. I'm sure you guys on the other site they believe that Jesus's tomb could be, and it's in the Holy Sepulchre Church. So this is the other location. We don't know exactly where the crucifixion and his tomb was. This is the other site. This is where the 6 churches run this area, and it's across like Ethiopian, I think Catholic, Armenian, and so it's a very beautiful church. And this was originally where it thought that the crucifixion and tomb happened, but then later on they kind of looked back and said, well, it says that it happened outside of the city gates, and therefore it could be at the Garden Tomb. So we don't really know. This is a part where they believe some of the land where Jesus walked was, and so that's the Garden of Gethsemane. So we went there, and so yeah, we don't know exactly, and so you don't speak to everything. You don't speak with certainty. I know Christians love to be certain about everything, but there's not we're going to speak about certainty with all these things, right? There's a level of humility. Hey, we don't know. We think the tradition says, that sort of thing. And so let me see if there's anything else I want to show you guys. Let me know if you guys got any other questions. I am by no means an expert. This is some of the Muslim quarter, yet they sell crosses, which I found hilarious. Shout out to the Muslims selling crosses. I've always wanted a tattoo and wanted something that has meaning to it, so thank you for this. Isn't that where faith comes in? Yes, that is where faith comes in. Absolutely. That is where faith comes in. So that's me, Pastor Mike Signorelli, who went with us last minute, and Pastor Jeff Moores. That's Andrew Fletcher, who's a friend of mine. Israeli soldiers, check this out. So this is in a Muslim section. Israeli soldiers there. And again, remember what I told you guys? I'm one of the lightest people there. Jews are not white. Okay, so that's our tour guide. His name is Ron, and those are the Israeli soldiers that got to stand behind a barricade because they can be attacked at any point in the Muslim quarter, which was historically controlled by Jordan and so on and so forth. Again, the city was destroyed in the year 700, which Jesus actually predicted, believe it or not. And then they rebuilt, and then they kept rebuilding and rebuilding. So a lot of the areas that Jesus walked were down below. So yes. So like even like the other location, that church that I showed you guys, they stand at a place and can look down where they think the tomb of Jesus was. And then the other place we went, they hadn't built on top of it, so you could see the city above it, if that makes sense, the old town of Jerusalem. We went to Bethlehem. 70 AD. Yep. Yeah, we went to Bethlehem. Can you describe the geography? Great question, Gabby. So the geography, believe it or not, is a lot like San Diego. Hills, beaches, beautiful climate. It felt like I was in SoCal. That like if you've driven through Southern California, you've seen the mountains, you've seen the hills. It felt different. It felt amazing. Jerusalem, I think, is 2,500 feet above seawater, I believe. So, it was a lot of hills, a lot of mountains, beautiful. So you're driving up and down. So at one point we were at the highest place, one of the highest places above seawater, and then the Dead Sea is one of the lowest places below sea level. Most important question, how was the food? Food was incredible. No bacon. So one of the things I had when I had a bacon cheeseburger when I got off. And most of it is kosher. Except if you're like in the non-Jewish parts. I liked the high amounts of meat and the high amounts of leafy greens. I'm over hummus, and I'm over their bread because their bread is delicious. So you have hummus, bread, high leafy green salads, and high chicken and lamb and beef. And so I can eat like that all the time, minus the bread and the hummus. Like if it was just the leafy greens and the meat, I could do it all day. Mediterranean climate. Did you ever go to Golgotha Hill? Yes, I think so. I honestly don't quite remember. We went to so many places. It was a lot. But yeah. Let me see if I can find it. I think it was Golgotha. The scariest part was probably going to the Gaza Strip wall. That was the trip because they just fired off rockets. I'll show you guys. This is them holding an older rocket that was fired into Gaza. Actually, that is the Iron Dome that shot down the Gaza rocket. So this was shot in a bomb shelter, a bomb basement. So that was a bit much, If I'm honest, that's the rocket that they shot over from Gaza. Rocket cost $150, and that was the rocket from the Iron Dome that shot it down. Have you met a Palestinian? Yes, Jonathan, you should rewind the stream. I met tons of Palestinians. I got a tattoo from a Palestinian Christian. A lot of the Christians there are Palestinian. The Iron Dome is definitely fascinating. Again, we did not go into Gaza because Israel completely removed themselves from Gaza in the year 2006, whereas the Palestinian side of the West Bank, there's 3 zones, and that was people still can go back and forth, except Israeli citizens can't go into Zone A. So yeah, I showed some stuff on the Garden of Gethsemane earlier. Yeah, went to the Garden of Gethsemane. That was cool. And again, guys, the archaeology is nothing is certain. Everything is maybe, most likely. This is why we believe. So there's a humility there with some of this stuff. Here is the skull. Who just asked about that? The Golgotha skull, right? It's right there. I just passed it. So this is the garden tomb. I'll show you guys again. So that's it right there, the Golgotha skull, and that's our tour guide. Ignore this first part. When I pan over, you guys will see there. So that's the skull of the hill right there. How would you describe the lives of Christians there and the way they practice Christianity? How is their devotion different from ours? Well, again, they don't view themselves as separate from Jews, but the Jews definitely don't like Messianic Christians, or they're not big fans of them, the more, serious Jews. And so Messianic Jews, the name of Yeshua is like a cuss word if you're talking to Messianic Jews. Excuse me, if Messianic Jews are talking to Jewish people, they view it as insulting, and they don't like the name of Yeshua. They're not fans. So that was interesting, to say the least. Now, if you're just like, I'm a Christian, it's not going to be any issues. If you start trying to evangelize, if you start trying to convert people, if you start trying to share the gospel, you can get hurt by both Muslims and Jews there. So I gotta send a massive shout out to all the subscribers, all the channel members, and all of our Patreon community. Most talented community, entire universe. For $5 a month, you can support us here. You can get the extended after party streams, all that kind of good stuff. And you can follow me on Instagram for more. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out some of the other videos I'll try to pin up over here about my time on the ground, getting interviews with our tour guide, with a Ethiopian, Israeli, Messianic Christian or Messianic Jew there. We had some really good conversations. I'll pin some of those over there.